Namaskar, dear viewers. Today we'll be discussing about Group of 20 countries G20 and climate change. This topic gains significance for two important reasons. The very important reason is that the Group of 20 countries is the largest economy of the world, and they have the money power, they have the technology, finance, and everything possible to streamline, to direct the global economy. The second important reason for discussing this particular topic is this year, 2023, India is having the presidency. And India is playing a pivotal role in the global climate governance and also, switching over from the fossil fuels to the renewable sector that is called as energy transition. And third important thing is that now that we know that India is the most populous country in the world, so we have a lot of things to do as far as the global climate governance is concerned, and also in case of climate change mitigation and adaptation. Now, as I said that this G20, it's a very interesting group of countries. This G20 basically it is it's a mixture of the highly developed countries and emerging countries. When I say emerging countries like India, China, they are developing country indeed, but their contribution to the world economy is highly significant. And the second important aspect is that, as I said, that 85% of the global GDP it is represented by G20 countries, and this is the second greatest point actually, because more than 85% of global GDP is represented by this group of countries. And the third important thing is that the kind of resource use, that again it's a very important aspect that has to be dealt at this point of time. When I say, because they are consuming more than 90% of the coal and 70% of oil and natural gases, so their energy consumption is very high, and that indeed led to the problem of global climate change, or in other words, it releases a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. More than 80% of global greenhouse gas emissions are emitted by G20 countries. So on one hand, they are a very rich country. On the other hand, if you look at it, they are consuming more of energy, and consequently they are releasing more of greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. And third important aspect that has to be dealt as far as G20 group of countries is concerned is that they have historical responsibility. That means that 99% of the global carbon dioxide concentration, what we are seeing now, historically these countries are responsible. They have released more of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, 99%. So these are the three important aspects that has to be dealt in with respect to the G20 countries. And this group of countries, if you see, it's basically it includes the 19 countries and European Union. So 19 countries, Canada, USA, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, UK, Germany, France, and Turkey, Italy, India, China, and Japan, Indonesia. So, quite number of countries. Diversity is there. G20 is known for the diversity in the way the finance is concerned, or in terms of the global economy, or in terms of the international trade as such. So a lot of diversity is there. The people, the energy consumption pattern, even the climate change aspect, if you look at it, the trends in greenhouse gas emissions, there are a lot of diversity is there. So this G20 countries is having a lot of significant role to play with respect to climate change mitigation. And the last point, as far as G20 group of countries are concerned, as I said that these group of countries are having a lot of technology prowess and scientific breakthrough. They are known for it. But however, if you see the kind of vulnerability, uh, each and every country is having their own kind of problems, or in other kind of words, I mean socioeconomic dimensions. If you look at it, each and every country is having their own thing. So the vulnerability is different for each and every country, and that means that in this group of countries, some countries are more vulnerable because of the socioeconomic condition, or even the kind of the economic status indeed. So these all also has to be taken into account as far as the group of G20 is concerned. The next important aspect is that the responsibility. Responsibility is also quite varied. When I say responsibility is quite varied, the point has to be taken is that when you consider US, United States of America, Canada, UK, their role in historical emissions are quite known. But on the other hand, the developing country like India, their role in historical emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, is very, very meager. So, having said this thing, the responsibility wise, it's quite different, and definitely the point has to be made is that the developed countries, much developed countries in this G20 group of countries, they have to have a kind of a pioneer role to take the proper initiative, climate change initiative, so that the best possible governance is done as far as under the UN umbrella. So this is the second point as far as the when you talk about the dimensions, that means the interface between G20 and climate change is concerned. And when you see when you and I said that it's the largest economies, because as far as the global economy is concerned, basically the agenda since the 1999, if you look at it, the G20 group of countries, the main discussion points were on the trade, international trade, how best they can improve the global economy, and how best they can remove the barriers, trade restrictions, barriers, and so on and so forth. And slowly and steadily, they started to look upon the development aspect. When I say development, economic development, and also sustainable development. Of late, they started to look at the issue of climate change. Because why? Because when they looked at the issue of climate change, they have come to know that climate change is affecting G20 group of countries also, and at the same time, the climate change can have a drastic effect on their growth. Their economy will be affected. It can even disrupt the developmental pathway. So that is the reason why, of late, since 2009, G20 in every presidency they started to talk about the climate change issues and the kind of commitments, what are the problems they are facing, and what are the measures, policy measures, programs that can be initiated at the group of G20 level, so that they can contain the increase in surface temperature. That's what discussed since 2009. And when incidentally, if you look at it in 2015, Paris Agreement came into picture, and Paris Agreement, categorically stated that if you're not taking steps to keep the surface air temperature, the increase in surface air temperature below 1.5 degrees centigrade, it will be very disastrous. When I say disastrous, because the kind of impact it can have on the human well-being, or even the well-being of the planet as well. So it will be disastrous in nature. So when I say the impact, climate change impact is so diverse, and also it is pervasive in nature. Everyone is influenced by the impact of climate change, and this is a very critical point that has to be taken to account. When I say though the G20 group of countries they are very rich, but they also will be impacted by climate change, and because of that thing, their financial wealth and the political wealth and everything will be severely affected by climate change. We know that because since the last century, the surface air temperature has increased to the tune of 1.1 degrees centigrade, and it is a very definitely the amount of increase, if you see it's 1.1 degrees centigrade, it's too much. That impact that we have seen in terms of increase in the sea level rise, ocean acidification, the kind of impact it is having on the living organisms, biological resources, so everything is influenced by climate change. So that is the reason why the G20 group of countries also, they came forward, okay, some steps has to be taken to contain climate change. And very incidentally, if you look, very interesting point is that this G20 group of countries, they started to take initiatives to contain climate change. uh, Possibly all measures were taken, and when they started to study in a very granular level, at a granular level, they were in a position to understand that the inequalities that is existing in the global landscape, that is severely affecting the human beings. And the same is the case with the G20 group of countries also. There are a lot of inequalities are there between the countries. So that is a very significant point, because this climate change is going to aggravate the inequalities. It may increase the inequalities. Why? Because earlier we can see that certain group of countries are very rich in terms of resources, but now you know, the another thing has come up, very important aspect is technology. Who is rich in technology? So they will be getting a lot of benefit. Let us see how and why. So when I talk about the what you call the G20 group of countries, more than 50 to 60% of the population is, it's what you call represented by this G20 group of countries. So it is a huge population, and when this population, if you see, more than 3.3 or 3.6 billion people are going to be affected by climate change. So that is a significant point that has to be taken into account, because this half of the global population is affected or vulnerable to climate change. So definitely there are a lot of steps, particularly because they are the front runners, the G20 group of countries are front runners, they have to take the steps possible. And a very interesting point as far as the climate change impact is concerned, they've come to know that since 1990s, so if you calculate it since 1990 to 2016, the number of extreme events, whether it is the tornadoes or typhoons or the floods and droughts, these are kind of extreme events that has increased tremendously. Not only at the region level, at the global level as well, it has been tremendously increased. And this increase is a very significant point that has to be taken into account, because within the group of 20 countries, G20 group of countries also, few countries are more vulnerable, particularly India, China, Turkey, Italy. They are more vulnerable to climate change impacts. They have faced a lot of extreme events, calamities, natural calamities. So they should be given enough, the finance part, the climate finances to be given. So these are all the agenda points that has to be taken into account as far as the negotiations were concerned among the G20 group of countries. And very interestingly, since 2017, AMBEC presidency, German presidency, later on what happened in 2018, Buenos Aires presidency also, very interesting points were discussed. The first agenda point in 2018, Buenos Aires, Argentina, presidency was infrastructure development. The second important point was change of technology, or technological change was required. The third important point was sustainable food future. Fourth important point was gender equality. Understand very carefully. In 2018, these are the agenda points. Four are the important agenda points. But underlying theme is climate change. They, when you talk about technological change, what is demanded is change towards a low carbon economy. Energy transition was expected. When you talk about the sustainable food future, they are trying to talk about the climate smart agriculture. When they were discussing about the gender equality, they are trying to bring to a point that the climate impacts are very gender specific. When I say gender specific, the women, children, or elderly people will be more affected because of climate change impacts. So that is the point. Gender equality was also taken into account. And the next important, yeah,
Hello. Hello.
there was a call from Delhi. Please ask me the questions.
Hello.
So these are all the points we're discussing: the technological change and the gender equality and the sustainable food
Hello.
future. And the most important aspect that has to be discussed is that the changing the energy mix. When I say energy mix, switching over from the fossil fuels to the renewable energy. So these are the four important agenda points that was taken to account in 2018 Buenos Aires presidency. And later on, if you look at it, slowly and steadily that was taken forward and more fine tuning was there. When I say fine tuning, the agenda points were discussed very at the granular level, and also they were in a position to bring out certain ideas how best we can switch over to the renewables, because that is the key aspect. Because when you see most of the countries are energy intensive. Ask me the question, please.
Yeah. Very good evening, Professor.
Yeah. Good evening, sir.
Hello.
Good evening, sir. Tell me.
I would like to just submit that
Okay,
we are really benefited by what you are talking about. Since this topic is G20 and climate, I would like to know the agenda of the country and how the G20 and our role is going to really match with each other, so that we can see that, yes, India is equally concerned for the climate issue, concerned with the climate change. And what is our role going to be in the G20 countries? That is what is my question, sir.
A very interesting question indeed, because I think in few minutes from now, I have explained this particular aspect. That's what I'll explain to you. The answer to your question is that this year India is getting the presidency. Okay, G20 presidency. When you talk about these agenda points, we are carrying forward, and particularly in our country, when you see India, as I said, that it's a developing country, and a lot of initiatives have been taken by our country. As far as the renewable energy mixture is concerned, because we are trying to switch over from the fossil fuels to the renewable energy, and that is one important point. The second important point is that in 2 years, I think in 2021, we have committed ourselves to climate neutrality by 2070. It's a very important point. When I say climate neutrality, we wanted to have net greenhouse gas emissions neutrality by 2070. For that, a lot of measures has to be taken, and that measure, what you said rightly, is that we'll be having certain agendas ourselves. By 2030, we wanted to have, for example, 50% of our electricity generation should be from renewables. That's number one point. The second important point is that we will be trying to have 500 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2030. And not only that thing, we'll be trying to take all the steps possible to reduce the carbon intensity. Having said this thing, as far as the renewable energy sector and the climate goals are concerned, as far as India is concerned, we have taken also a lot of steps, the International Solar Alliance, and very recently in this year's budget, if you look at it, we have taken a very important mission that is called Green Hydrogen Mission. So everything we are moving towards the renewable energy sector. We wanted to reduce the use of coal, oil, and natural gas. We wanted to substitute also with the green hydrogen, renewable energy, and also we wanted to make our consumption more sustainable. That is the reason why, very interesting point is that whatever the agenda we are talking about, the underlying philosophy is life. When I say life, lifestyle for environment. When I say lifestyle for an environment, it's again kind of a comprehensive term indeed, because it incorporates a lot of sustainable consumption of natural resources, the way we live, the way we lead, and also the way we consume also. So everything sustainable consumption has to be taken into account. That is the reason why every agenda we are talking about, whether it's a low carbon development agenda or even the planning, whatever we are planning at the government level, everything at the underlying principle is life philosophy that has been adopted. And having said this thing, not only this thing, as far as the role G20, fine, this year we are having the presidency. The more important thing is that we are taking a leadership role in the renewable sector. International Solar Alliance, it is under our leadership. When a country's leadership, we have taken a lot of steps, and that is the reason why many countries have come forward, because definitely they are supporting in our initiative. And not only the International Solar Alliance, think about the BRIC. BRIC is again a group of regional group of countries, and there also our standing is much higher, because we are taking all the steps possible and to reduce the carbon footprint. And this has to be taken into account very importantly, because our per capita consumption, it is very meager. It's 1.9 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. But when you look at the the per capita consumption of US or Canada, any developed country for that matter, it is 10 times larger. But since the per capita consumption is so less, even then, being a developing country, we are taking all the steps possible. And that is a very interesting question I had, in fact, for this session. And I hope the listener would have been happy with my answer. Okay. So this is about our what you call the presidency, India's presidency in 2023. So now the critical point is that when you talk about a G20 as a group of countries, what is the critical point? What they need to be done? What they should be doing it? Because they have a lot of responsibility to do it. The first important point is that they wanted to have an energy transition. For energy transition means you wanted to switch over from fossil fuels to renewables. For that, 120 trillion US dollars is required. 120 trillion US dollars is required between period of 2016 to 2050. It's a huge amount of money. For this to happen, because it's a very huge amount and a lot of investment is required, and for this, definitely G20 is having a very important role to play. The second important point is that because when you wanted to switch over to a renewable sector, what is more important? Because technology is required. Certain group of countries, like particularly the OECD. OECD means Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and China is going to get a lot of benefit because as far as the patents in energy innovation, research, and everything, so they are the pioneers. So these group of countries, OECD and China, is going to get a lot of benefit because they are technologically they are very sound. And very important point here is that when we talk about the technology, it's fine. There are certain group of countries, even within G20, they are very rich in resources, natural resources like your coal, oil, whatnot, everything like your Russia, Saudi Arabia, and they are very rich in these kind of fossil fuel resources. So some kind of incentive has to be given to them so that they will be also in a position to or move towards the renewable sector. And this is a very critical point. For this to happen, who will be taking an important role? Particularly the G20 has to take an important role. That is the reason why this topic gains significance. And that is the reason why we are discussing this particular point. For this very reason, that G20 has to have a pivotal role. Why? Because for the transition, green transition to take place, for a low carbon economy to take place, to keep it in in a proper position, three important things is required. One is credibility and leadership. The second important thing is that the knowledge about the climate impacts that has to be given. It has to be shared. And that is the second important requirement. Third important thing is global partnership. So these are the three important requirements for low carbon economy. And for these three important requirements, only G20 group of countries can make an important role to play. So as far as your credible and the leadership role, because G20 is that it's a mixture of countries. Both the richest countries are also there, emerging economies also there. Some countries are having a lot of resources, some countries are not having resources. Like your Japan is not having resources, natural resources, but still they are part of G20 because they are the largest economy as far as the trade is concerned. So it's a group of mixture, a lot of diversity is there. So they can have a very important role. The leadership role can be taken by G20 group of countries. The second important thing is that the transformation, or in other words, the information transfer. When I talk about information transfer, because that is a key aspect, because for instance, you wanted the pension fund managers or the insurance companies, they wanted to invest money in certain sectors. They cannot invest in the coal or oil and natural gas because they will be going slowly and steadily will be phasing out. So they will be wanted to invest in certain sectors which will be providing a lot of benefits to the insurance company. And for this thing, the impact study is required. Climate change information is to be given to the pension fund. A lot of managers are there. They need it. The third important thing is that the partnership. When you talk about partnership, global partnership is required between a group of countries. Some countries are, technologically having a very sound, and some group of countries are laggards. When I say laggards, they are, they are not having enough technology. So the kind of partnership is required between these two group of countries. So for this to happen, definitely G20 has to play a very important role. And not only this thing, because as far as when you talk about the economic strength of the G20 group of countries, they account for more than 85% of global GDP. So they have a lot of finance part. So for the climate finance to be successful, G20 group of countries should come forward. This is as far as the transition is concerned. And second important point is that when we wanted to have a when you talk about a global health of the planet, definitely the poor countries or the poor people should be provided a lot of support, and a proactive support, kinds of insurance has to be given to them, and support system, security system has to be given to them. For this also, G20 group of countries has to have a very important role to play. The third important thing is that, because when you whatever we are talking about is that as far as the poverty and whatnot, malnutrition, everything is the greatest issue, because this climate change can aggravate the conditions. It is going to be a greatest challenge. For this, because definitely, sustainable agriculture or a sustainable food system has to be taken into account. And for that sustainable food system to be more successful, pragmatically implemented, definitely the G20 group of countries has to come forward. Why? Because when you talk about the group of countries, G20 group of countries, their contribution in terms of agriculture production is much higher, and in that way, because they will be having a better role to play as far as the reducing the poverty and hunger and malnutrition. And at the same time, if the technology, whatever the technology they're going to adopt in the agriculture field, if they're very innovative, or if it is less harmful to the environment, in that way it is very important thing, because the climate change, as far as the mitigation potential is concerned, agriculture sector is having a very important role to play also. See, these are all the action points that has to be taken into account as far as your G20 group of countries and climate change is concerned. And as I said that, because in this year, the question also has come up as far as what will be the role of India and everything. As I said, this as far as our country is concerned, we are taking a very important role as far as the solar energy is concerned, renewable energy is concerned, green hydrogen sector is concerned, even the kind of use we are having as far as the biofuels. We are into, the kind of research and development that we are into fourth generation. Not first, second, and third. We are into fourth generation of biofuels. So the third and fourth are very important thing, because the kind of thinking, the kind of vision we are having as far as our country is concerned, because we have kept ourselves, being a developing country, we have kept ourselves the climate goal, the climate neutrality goal by 2070. It's a very significant point, and in this regard, India will be having a very important role to play as far as the G20 countries is concerned. In fact, we can have a leadership role to play to make this the climate initiative or climate mitigation more successful, so that we can be achieving the goal of the Paris objectives. Because whatever we are talking about it, the surface air temperature should, the increase in surface air temperature should be well below 1.5 degrees centigrade. For that only we are taking all the steps possible. Thank you very much.